and welcome to Marriage Moments with life coach Robin May. Every month, I take time right here in my home office to bring you strategies, tips, and principles designed to educate, encourage, and equip all of us in the area of marriage. This month, we are going to talk about what it means to be a winning team in our marriage. Last month, LeBron James made big waves as he returned back to his hometown to play basketball. Now, I'm not necessarily the biggest sports fan other than cheerleading and gymnastics, thank you very much. But even I had to pay attention to that because what it means is, as bad as LeBron James is, and we know he's a bad basketball player, as bad as he cannot win without a team. And so I want you to understand that you cannot win without you and your spouse being on one accord as a team. So I am going to share with you what it means to be a team. We're going to talk about the 6 habits of a losing team. We're going to talk about habits of a winning team. And then I want to help you become the MVP, the most valuable player in your marriage. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. So in marriage, when we talk about a team, we're talking about 2 people coming together using their complementary skills to complete a task. Did you hear what I said? Using their complementary skills. In other words, you and your spouse don't have the same skills, you have different skills. Now, that seems simple enough, but the truth is, if you would admit it, we often get so frustrated with our spouses because they do things differently than us or they think differently than us. Listen, God did not design for you to marry you. He brought you a partner that's different from you for a reason. And so the 2 of you are coming together using your complementary skills to complete a task. Now, for those of us who are Christians, that task is to represent Christ and the church right here on earth. And so you and your spouse should be a representation for the world to see of why God designed marriage. So what are the habits of a losing team? Well, number 1, a losing team allows one loss to define their entire season. They allow one loss to define their entire season. So in other words, they develop a mindset of losing. How does that relate to marriage? Well, many of us allow one issue that we've been dealing with to plague us so much that we think because of that one issue, we'll always have trouble in our marriage. Or maybe your mom and dad or the generations before you had trouble in their marriage. So you just assume because they did, you will too. That does not have to be the truth. Don't allow one issue to define your entire marriage. Number 2, losing teams stop practicing or preparing for different scenarios. So in your marriage, you know every time your cousin, your brother, or your mother comes in town, you and your spouse have it out, but you don't prepare for that scenario. Or maybe you know that every summer you want to go on a big summer vacation, the budget is blown, and you guys end up having it out, but you don't prepare for that in advance. In your marriage, you have to prepare for different scenarios and situations so that you can have a plan in advance for how you're going to handle it. The 3rd habit of a losing team is they lose sight of the bigger picture. Oh my gosh, this happens so often in marriage. We get so consumed with the day-to-day functioning of our relationship that we forget that there's a bigger picture in mind. Remember, as believers, the bigger picture is that we're supposed to be representing Christ and the church. On a smaller scale, we came together because we loved one another. And so don't lose sight of the bigger picture in your marriage. The 4th habit of a losing team is they stop listening to their coach. I want you to think about all the greats. Serena, Michael Jordan, recently even our little own Gabby Douglas. All of the greats, the people who soar to the top, they have a coach and they listen to their coach. Of course, in marriage, God should be our ultimate coach. But seriously, you want to identify somebody right here on earth that can help the 2 of you navigate through your marriage. Stop trying to handle everything on your own. Tune in to somebody that can help challenge you and equip you in your marriage. And lastly, the last habit of a losing team is that they stop communicating. Oh my gosh, they get so frustrated with what's going on because now at this point they're losing. So they stop talking to one another. As a matter of fact, they even start turning on one another. They start pointing the blame at each other instead of taking responsibility for where they are. If you are struggling, the very last thing you need to do is to stop communicating. Keep the communication lines open. All right, we talked about the habits of a losing team. So what are the habits of a winning team? Because all of us are going to have a winning marriage. Number one, make sure you're on a team that is compatible. This is particularly for those of you guys who are preparing for marriage. Make sure that you and your future partner are compatible. And if you're already married, you need to sit down and identify what are the strengths that each of us have and make sure you stay in your lane. You have to know, am I the person that can budget very well? Or am I the person that can manage the day-to-day functioning of the home? Am I the better cook? Am I the person who does better with cleaning up the home? You need to know the strengths of each person on the team so that as you move forward, your skills are not competing against one another, but they are coming together to help the overall team. The second habit of a winning team is that they are clear on what a win is. Let's use a sports analogy. Of course, the ultimate goal is to win the game. But good teams are able to identify additional wins. For example, if we can just do better on defense during this game, or if we can score this many points during this game, that's a win. So you and your spouse need to sit down and identify what is a win in our marriage. Maybe a win is this month we save this amount of money. Or maybe a win is this year, our win is that we're going to get our child into college. I don't know what the win is for you, but you and your spouse need to get clear on what the win is for your marriage. The third habit of a winning team is that they constantly revisit the rules for the team. So in other words, what governs what we do? How do we determine what is okay for us as a team and what isn't? I know in basketball or football, when teams are traveling to other states, a lot of times they have a curfew, surprisingly, with what time they have to be back in the room at a certain time to make sure that everybody is ready for the game the next day. In your marriage, you need to consistently revisit the rules. Are the rules that we've created working for us? How do we govern ourselves accordingly based on what we've established? So revisit the team rules. The fourth habit of a winning team is that they develop a winning strategy. They don't just assume that they're going to win. They don't just hope and pray that they're going to win. They have a strategy for winning. You and your spouse need to sit down and develop a strategy. Make sure you go to IBelieveInMarriage.com, sign up for our newsletter, and you will automatically receive a template that will help you and your partner put together a strategy for your whole life. If you're going to win, if your marriage is going to win, you have to have a strategy. The fifth habit of a winning team, we talked about this a little bit earlier, is to make sure you find the right coach. You don't need to listen to everybody. You don't need all of your friends, all of your families in your business. As a matter of fact, that's dangerous. But the two of you do need to identify the right coach for you. And remember, the coach could be a video just like this, or an author that you trust. It could be your pastor. It could be somebody that can be intimately involved in your life. But you have to find the right coach. The final habit of a winning team is that a winning team spends time together. You can tell a team that has camaraderie versus a team that only gets together when it's time to get on the field. A winning team, they spend time together so that they can know one another on the court and off the court, on the field and off the field. You and your spouse have to spend time together if you're going to win at marriage. So we talked about what it means to be a team in marriage. Remember, it's the two of us coming together with complementary skills to complete a task. We've talked about the habits of a losing team. I've given you the habits of a winning team. Now, let me tell you how you can become the MVP in your marriage. I personally believe you and your spouse should take turns being the most valuable player, or at least striving for that position. Can you imagine if we both are doing what it takes to be the best in our marriage? Neither one of us can lose. So here are some characteristics of the most valuable player, the MVP. Number one, the MVP puts the team's needs above their own more often than not. So in other words, that means sometimes that superstar player passes the ball even though they could have easily taken the shot. In your marriage, sometimes you have to make sure that you step back so that your partner can shine. Maybe this is not the year that you quit your job to start the business if it's not financially rewarding for your family. Maybe this year you don't take the annual girls trip so that you can do a family trip. I don't know what it means for you, but I want you to intentionally put your family or your team's needs above your own. Secondly, the MVP is willing to take on the slack when the other players needs him or her. So in your marriage, sometimes you might have to carry a little bit more of the weight. But because both of you are trying to outdo one another in being the MVP, you don't have to carry that weight forever, but every so often you might have to carry a little bit more. Or maybe you sense an area that you really could cover your partner in prayer. The MVP is willing to pick up the slack. Next, the MVP is consistent and reliable. You know, if you're playing basketball and if you really know your teammate, you can pass the ball without even having to look because you know your teammate is going to be there. Well, the MVP is always ready and available. The MVP is not shaky or shady. In marriage, you want to make sure that you are consistent and reliable. You want to make sure that your partner knows when they need you, you're going to be right in the place. They don't have to go looking for you. They don't have to wonder. They don't have to be nervous if you're going to be able to handle it. The MVP is consistent and reliable. And lastly, the MVP knows their position and they play it well. Whether it's the forward or the point guard, whether it's the quarterback or the running back, the MVP knows their position and they play it well. That is the same in marriage. In marriage, you got to know your position and you have to play it well. The MVP is not trying to play somebody else's position. So in marriage, do you and your spouse know each other's position? Remember, we talked about having a strategy, and we talked about the importance of knowing one another's strengths and weaknesses. Sit down and identify what's my role and what's yours, and let's make sure we play our roles well. All right, guys, there you have it. We've talked about what it means to be a team, the habits of a losing team, habits of a winning team, and what it means to be the MVP in your marriage. Now, let's take some time for some discussion questions. Number one, I want you and your spouse to sit down and talk about what is a win for us in our marriage over the next 6 months. I don't want you to look at a whole year. Just over the next 6 months, what is a win for us? What is a win for us financially? What is a win for us in our intimate life? What is a win for us when it comes to parenting? I want you to sit down and really think about what is a win. Number two, I want you to revisit the habits of a losing team. And I want you to have the courage to identify if any of those habits are showing up in your marriage. And then lastly, I want the two of you to talk about, and then lastly, I would love for you guys to customize these principles. What is another characteristic of an MVP when it comes to your marriage? What would make you vote your spouse as the most valuable player? So in other words, what do you really need during this season of your marriage that would make you say, oh my gosh, my spouse stepped up to the plate and I know that they are the MVP during this season? Now, once you take some time to answer these questions, I would love for you to go to facebook.com/IBelieveInMarriage. Find this video and share your thoughts and your comments. Also, if this information has blessed you, or if I Believe in Marriage as a whole is challenging you and encouraging you, can you tell your family and friends? IBelieveInMarriage.com can be a movement, but we can't do it without you. Again, this is Life Coach Robin May with Marriage Moments. I look forward to connecting with you again soon. Take care.